Let's record. Awesome. All right. Kia ora everyone, and welcome to another session of Shift Happens. Today I'm stoked we're having our first communications interview with Jonathan Carson, who is from a business called Content Lab. Jonathan has been our main copywriter actually for Shift On for the past few years. We've done a lot of work together, awesome mahi with our clients in storytelling and communications. And Jonathan used to be based in Nelson here as a journalist for the Nelson Mail, which is how we first met, and then in his hometown of Whanganui, and is now in Germany.
Yeah. Bit of a crazy place to be at this particular time. I think we've got something like 85,000 COVID-19 cases across the country at the moment, but for some reason the city that I'm in has no cases, which seems like a bit of a miracle. So
awesome.
Just kind of carrying on as usual. There's a bit of a lockdown situation going on here, but not quite as strict as New Zealand. But yeah, strange times for everybody indeed, particularly those in business. So keen to talk about storytelling, messaging, comms, that kind of stuff, and provide some ideas around how to approach that during these particularly difficult times.
Yeah, awesome. And I appreciate you taking the time, because I think over the last couple of weeks, as the situation has kind of unfolded, around the world, it's obviously been a big couple of months, but in particular here, the intensity and the pace of it for New Zealand businesses has been really relentless for the last couple of weeks. People have struggled to get their heads around what's happening. We have struggled I know businesses, there's been a lot of grey area for businesses around whether they will be able to operate, and as restrictions were rolled out, kind of uncomfortable feelings setting in around the country of not knowing whether to operate or not. Now we're in an interesting place here in Aotearoa, where we have the clarity of knowing what our strategy is, which is more than can be said for a lot of countries right now, it seems. And and it's pretty clear we're in a severe lockdown that has sent most businesses home at the moment, aside from essential services. And so it puts us in a really interesting position where at least it's fairly black and white for most businesses. So there'll be businesses listening and who are in the group who do fit into that category of essential services, and they have different needs right now at the moment as well. They're in a position to still serve their customers, and I've seen some great work that'd be cool to discuss there as well. And then for all the other businesses who at the moment are either having to operate on limited capacity, like people in our industry who have been sent home but are still in a position to work, through to hospitality and tourism companies who are in no position to operate whatsoever at the moment, but do have capacity, I guess, and time at the moment to actually refocus their business and kind of double down on their brand reputation. So I don't know what it was like for you, but it was pretty fascinating to experience the pre-lockdown kind of scenario and how different businesses responded, the good, the bad, and the really ugly. And what was interesting for us in New Zealand is I think it was pretty obvious to me that even the larger businesses were not immune from making stupid comms decisions in those first couple of weeks. The warehouse in New Zealand was a great example of really botched communications. That it's a brand that's synonymous for Kiwis. They know it well, it's trusted, and they got a lot of flack over a couple of days for trying to reposition themselves as an essential service. They are operating in some capacity at the moment, but it was interesting to acknowledge that the intensity and the scale and the pace of COVID-19 meant that everyone was kind of scrambling to understand what to say. Like, was that your experience as well?
Yeah, it seemed like there was a lot of panic going on. There was, with the speed at which the restrictions came online, especially in New Zealand, who I think responded faster than most other countries to the risk of COVID-19. And yeah, I just definitely noticed that a lot of brands sort of were rushing to react, and in that rush made some questionable decisions, maybe that didn't align with their brand or their brand story. And I think the example you gave with the warehouse, pivoting to become an essential service provider after all these years where they've been, that hasn't been their story, and all of a sudden that was. Just examples like that, as well as we saw some property management companies come out and just go hard line on their customers, saying we're not going to tolerate any missed rent and that kind of stuff. And it's just not. It was just panic. They were worried about their own revenue, their own bottom line, and that was what was driving their decision making. And which is understandable, because we're all in business. We all do need to make money, but at a time like this, I think it's really valuable to be able to take time to pause and consider the way you're going to go out there and deliver your message and tell your story. And it's super important that it aligns with the story you've been telling up until this point.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's an interesting and fast kind of realization for people to go, like, when my operational capabilities are stripped that quickly, like I can't run my cafe anymore, I can't operate my tourism business, there's so many things I can't do, that when you really strip it all back, I think it's been one of the biggest kind of awakenings for people to see that when that all disappears for a period of time, all you really have is brand, and that brand is it's the culture you have for your team as well, and whether your team is likely to stick with you in these times, and your customers, and whether they will in a period where they might not be able to access your products or services, and they're overwhelmed with information, whether they'll remember you at the other end of it. And that's been a really confronting question, I think, for brands to explore, of like, okay, at the other end of this, what, will I matter? Will people remember me? And some brands have done a lot of work in that space prior, some haven't at all, but I know for a lot of them right now, there's some real soul searching going on about why did I matter above and beyond just delivering products and services? And I think that's a really interesting question to be pondering right now.
Absolutely, man. That's something that I like to focus on when I work with clients, is the why I do what I do, and the purpose of business, and the way that you help people overcome a specific problem, and that kind of thing. Yeah, when you sit down and everything sort of falls apart that you're used to, and that's all that's left is the why. For some people, that can look quite fragile and quite shaky, and it's a good time. Like I don't want to be too insensitive with this either, because I know that for some businesses this is like an absolute game ender. Like there is no way out of this, and I want to acknowledge that as well, that there are some businesses that are just going to be so badly hit by this that no matter what strategy they take with this kind of storytelling stuff, it's not going to be the answer. So I do want to acknowledge that. But it is an opportunity for those who have the time to sort of sit back and reconsider their why. Like, why are they in business? What purpose are they serving? How can they help people at this particular time? And yeah, to sort of work on their business rather than in it for a short time. Think about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely hear what you're saying. And I think there is, I think for a lot of businesses, they are built around, particularly small businesses, and we have to be really cognizant of the fact that small businesses are obviously the most directly impacted. No one's immune. I mean, if you told me a few months ago that Air New Zealand was going to tank, it's not something I would have believed. They're a very strong business, so no one's immune at the moment. That's the scale of the disruption. But small businesses are particularly hard hit, because they most of the time don't have the cash reserves to ride it out, essentially. So that's a lot of the scenarios that people are facing of, okay, my revenue stopping, but my overheads aren't all stopping, and the government has intervened as kind of as much as possible on that at the moment, but that won't work for everyone. What's interesting to reflect on that, though, is even for those businesses, I feel like even if you strip back the business and the brand to some extent, that particularly for small businesses, whether they are retailers or hospitality outlets or tourism, that their people come to the front. And so when I think about hospitality, I think quite a lot of the time I think about the relationship I have with the people behind the hospitality business. And whilst a lot of them are facing really challenging and uncertain times, and the future is just unclear at the moment. It's not, I don't think anyone's made the full decision yet, but it's unclear and scary for them. I take some comfort in knowing that those businesses and people that have poured into their local communities, that have strong relationships with their
Mm.
customers and with their staff, that even if the premises changed and the concept changed and things, that still carries weight and that still carries value. And I guess that's what I'm saying about when you strip it all back and you are completely void of your ability to operate and deliver on your business right now. That's the stuff that counts. And full credit to a lot of people who have put years and years of work into running those communities. I know for me in our community, I frequent all the hospitality outlets here and know the people well, and certainly for the social impact this is having on our community, it's the one thing I'm looking forward to the most. So while things are challenging and they're real for people, and we're talking about people's livelihoods here, and it is serious, I take some comfort in knowing that I can't wait to have a beer at the local bar and go back and have a coffee, and the types of comforts that people will want to return to. And so in this period where you can't operate, all you can do is
Mm.
communicate.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that's the question that people have been pondering though, is how do I communicate? Should I still be marketing? What should I be saying? Those are the questions that I've seen being asked time and time again. People are super uncertain about how to approach marketing, storytelling, comms
Mm.
in this pandemic situation, because they don't want to be seen as being opportunistic. They don't want to be seen as being insensitive. They don't want to say the wrong thing, put their foot in it, and do damage to their brand. And they also, from what I can tell, they're quite cautious and quite wary of asking people to spend money at a time when money is super uncertain and there's not going to be a whole lot of disposable income in a lot of families. And that's typically what marketing has been, right? It's been asking people to spend money. And I guess now is an opportunity to sort of reconsider how to go about telling your story in a way that doesn't necessarily do that so explicitly, a bit more sensitivity and a bit more kind of attentiveness to how you go about telling your story and communicating with your audience and your customers.
Mm. Totally agree, and I've had run up against that situation a lot with clients and friends and things at the moment of really having to kind of clearly make the decision that now, despite the kind of temptation to push for a sale has probably never been greater, because people are seeing that sales are not flowing in the same way they are, and that was even pre-lockdown in the way they have been, and so the temptation to push quite aggressively or desperately for a sale has never been greater. But again, the cost of that in the long run in terms of brand and confidence and trust in you versus getting that kind of short-term benefit is just not there. And what I've had to communicate to a lot of people that I think have been really responsive to is that even if your temptation as a non-essential business right now is to push for sales, try and avoid it, because if for nothing else, it just won't work. You do not have, people do not care right now. You do not have their attention. They are completely and wholeheartedly focused on this pandemic. It's affecting everyone in different ways. Obviously, there are huge disparities there in terms of economic status and other things, but it is in some sense affecting everyone. And so it's a very difficult time. It was already hard to get people's attention. All the things that are coming up for me around communications and marketing through this time are not new concepts. The idea that the hardest thing to achieve is to get people's attention was true a couple of months ago, but it's even truer now, because you need to answer the question more clearly than ever before of why should I care? Why are you getting my attention right now? Because I'm being overwhelmed and I'm drowning in information. And so I think it's useful at this point to split the conversation two ways, because some businesses are just not operational at all, and we need to deal with how to kind of build brand and loyalty over that time. But some businesses are, and in New Zealand, the lockdown came down very hard and very fast, and it was essentially kind of petrol stations, supermarkets and pharmacies was basically the initial answer. And slowly, day by day, we're seeing the government, I think, take the right strategy, which is come down hard early, work out what the problems are with that and the flaws of that lockdown are, and then slowly kind of release things as needed. And we've seen that. So electronics, for example, has been included, and there are trades and services that are being allowed to do essential work now as well. And so that's the process that's taking place at the moment. And from an economic perspective, because you and I have both acknowledged on the call before, the economic impacts are substantial, and in the long run will be felt harder than the virus potentially once that's under control. And so right now we need to be focusing our thinking on, okay, during this period of lockdown, there is limited money circulating, and it would be great if that didn't all circulate back to just a couple of supermarkets, which is what we operate in New
Yeah.
Zealand. And so I'm really encouraging at the moment of New Zealand businesses who fit the essential services category to get up and running and sell directly to their customers. And I want to highlight a couple of those that I think have done a particularly good job of it. And one of those is Pure Peony, the Dot in Georgia, who are shipping products direct to their customers for sensitive skin care and soap, which is very important right now. People are very stressed, so they're having to get closer to their customer in such a way that they know that the kids are at home at the moment. Problems like eczema and things can be stress related as well, or they can be aggravated by stress, and so they are having to talk directly to their customers at the moment too. But also on the other end of it, luxury items like buying your wine at the moment from the winery rather than the supermarket, I think is a really good move for stimulating the local economy, because we're getting direct to those customers. And a business that has done that really well here in Nelson is Chia Sisters. And I don't know if you know what they've done, but so Chia Sisters are an essential service because they sell directly to supermarkets, and so they fit the category, and they are also able to ship around the country. So like many businesses, they have been highlighting that. And then today they made, I thought, what was a really phenomenal and genuinely supportive move, which is they recognised that a large part of their clientele are cafes, and that a huge part of their business has been damaged, but ultimately the sustainability of their business relies on other people's businesses. And this is what we're kind of all finding, I think, at the moment, is there's an ecosystem here to consider. And so rather than trying to just push online sales and take as much of the revenue as possible, they have today announced that if you use any cafe in New Zealand is eligible for a code for the cafe, so call it River Kitchen or Toad Hall or whatever. And if I buy my box of Chia drinks online, which I did the other day, and put in that code, the cafe gets 20% of the revenue, which is getting cash directly to those businesses.
That's awesome. That's the kind of initiatives you want to see in this time, right? It's creative, and it's effective, and it's also in line with the Chia brand and their story as well. That's a perfect example.
Yeah, totally, and I think that's what picking up on your point. That's what I have always associated with Chia. It's what I've always seen in the way they operate. They're a certified carbon zero business. They pay the living wage. They take a lot of care in their packaging and their product, and the very front of their brand has been about providing nutritious drinks for people. And I think to see that kind of evolve today to going, even in this situation where their business will be impacted quite severely by COVID-19 and the impact on hospitality, that their minds went immediately to how to support their customers as well. And that matters, because it matters, and it's the right thing to do. And the visibility on businesses doing the right thing at the moment is really high. But like you say, it's also effective. It also makes complete sense, because cafes at the moment have an audience, and they have a loyal audience. And right now, I've found a way as a frequent someone who frequents cafes all the time and drinks Chia. I've found a way to kind of go, wow, I can do something that I couldn't do yesterday, which is support a local cafe whilst getting a product I really enjoy. It's an amazing example of how to kind of take advantage of the current situation and get closer to your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is like a perfect example of what we've been talking about as well, regarding the shift from simply hard selling to helping, which I think is the strategy that all brands should be looking to take when it comes to communicating and marketing at this time. And this idea of Chia going to their customers and being like, rather than thinking, well, how can we sell as many direct consumer products as possible and get our cash flow turning over at this time, they've gone, how can we help our customers while at the same time
Mm,
they can make money, but they're passing on that benefit to cafes,
mm.
which that's the strategy, man. That's the way to be thinking at the moment, I think.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to reflect because they and all the workshops that I've run over the past sort of 5 or 6 years since we started running seminars, one of the slides that has been consistent throughout the whole thing is stop selling, start helping. It's been
Yeah.
there the whole way through because disruption is not new to businesses, and the digital this is far more intense, of course, and much faster, but digital disruption was a big deal, and marketing has over the last 10, 20 years significantly changed, I think, from this whole interruption strategy of trying to be the loudest and this whole the price and product and promotion kind of mindset through to building brand, building loyalty, building community, being of value, helping and actually mattering as a brand, becoming far more important. And so that trajectory was already really clear. And this feels like it's just massively nudged along in such a way that it's becoming more evident than ever before why that's so important. And, even locally here, I know Ruby Bay Kitchen, for example, is just a takeaway outlet in Ruby Bay, a tiny business. And
Yeah.
he shut up shop prior to being required to, and went home and has every day since released a video of him making bread and a tutorial on how to make
Oh,
bread while you're at home. Perfect example.
wow.
Yeah.
That's the example I used in my blog post just the other day about
Yep.
but I didn't know he
I
was
think
doing that, but that's
I think
exactly
you did use it.
exactly what I said. Yeah. I said, what's an example that a local artisan baker could do to
You did.
help their audience at this time? And I said they could literally post tutorial videos on YouTube showing a family how to make their own bread while in lockdown. I thought that was a really cool example of how you could help rather than simply sell at this time, and would translate into brand loyalty, to brand equity over the long run. But yeah, so cool that he's actually doing that. I didn't realize.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. And
Yeah.
for me, I've never stepped foot in the place. His videos have been great, and
Yeah.
I think my awareness of his business, I think he's had the door shut for a couple of weeks, but my
Wow.
awareness of his business is much greater than it was beforehand. And so
Mhm.
if and when, such time, whether it's in 3 weeks or further along, hospitality outlets are given the green light to open again in New Zealand, he's on my radar straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And another example that I wanted to give a quick shout out to was Emma Heke, who
Yeah.
produces those herbal teas in Nelson, I believe.
Yeah.
And she's part of the Shift Happens group, and I saw her post that while she has been uncertain about how she can go about sending her products directly to her customers, which is her main way of selling, I believe, she started posting on Facebook little recipes. So people can go into their own gardens, collect their own herbs, and make their own teas at home, which that's perfect. Again, it's an opportunity to help, it's an opportunity to add value. But on the other side of this, you're going to be looked upon more fondly by your audience and your customers because you were there for them during this time. You helped out, you gave them something to do, and in a sense, she's also giving away some of her own knowledge, which goes into her product. But I think that's the way to be thinking at the moment. It's great to see these small local businesses getting creative and turning to helping. That's the way.
And I think Emma's. I'm glad you raised that because Emma's totally worth acknowledging because there's an authenticity element there too, which is Emma's always had a very kind of direct, authentic connection to her audience, and she's built it, her business. Almost entirely through Facebook and Nelson Markets, but she's always been really strong on social media, and she has also been personally really vocal about the need to take this virus seriously quite early, actually. A couple of months ago, Emma was starting to really raise the alarm and was voluntarily doing things around pulling back and self-isolating and that. And so I recognise that, and she was put in a position where when the lockdown came into force, as you say, she was really uncertain about what to do. So initially she made the decision that she felt the most comfortable not to contribute to the noise out there at the moment and the activity, and that the right thing to do was to just stop. So she stopped, and in the meantime she did the initiative you're talking about, which is providing recipes, and she reached out to her customers and she provided a really genuine way of helping them. And then as the situation became a lot clearer and it was the rules started to evolve, as they have over the past week, it became pretty clear that she qualified as an essential service. And now she's back up and running. But through that
Yeah.
time, because she was authentic right throughout, and she's able to ship teas again now, because she was so authentic and communicated so clearly with her audience right the way through, we were already a customer of Emma's, but I feel far more indebted to her for her sense of social responsibility that she's displayed so authentically throughout, and been really upfront and transparent about where she's at and that she's confused about it and she's working on it. And in the meantime, this is what can happen. And I know she didn't take the decision to operate lightly, and I really respect that. And I think people notice these things, and that's why there are businesses that I think are doing an incredible job just by being authentic in themselves and communicating, because nobody knows. And whether you're communicating with your customers or your team, if you're a cafe right now, you have no idea when you're going to be able to open again. You can't provide that level of certainty anymore. So you do have to be kind of authentic about that. You do have to be transparent, and I think that provides an amazing opportunity to adjust the way we've traditionally thought about marketing into a really new and exciting space that I think is far more positive. And I know for the blog you wrote, that you've used the term mindful marketing. Like why did mindfulness come into it?
I mean, mindful marketing is what I've called it, and it doesn't really matter what you call it. At the end of the day, I just consider it's marketing that gives a shit. It's being a bit more conscious, a bit more thoughtful. But I called it mindful marketing just simply because mindfulness plays quite a big part in my personal life. And it's been really helpful on a personal level during this crisis. And so that's why it's sort of translated into the way I think about business and marketing as well. It sort of just permeates every part of my life. But so I created this blog post. I called it Mindful Marketing, and the whole idea around it was, basically, if you think about the way that environmentally friendly businesses came into the fore, maybe in the last 10 to 20 years, back in the day, wasn't given a second thought as to how you operated your business on that level. Today, the businesses that work, mindful of their environmental impact, that took steps to reduce their carbon footprint, who really took that kind of side of things seriously back then. Today, they're seen as like the leaders. They're the brands that people look upon fondly. They're the ones that people are most loyal to, because that's become an important part of our culture. And I spend a lot of time thinking about the way we do marketing these days, and the way that we sort of interrupt people's lives with messages and sales pitches, and the approach we've taken over the years, which has been to hard sell and to play on people's insecurities and inadequacies, and to try and draw money out of people. And I guess I thought I've always had a bit of an issue with that approach, and upon thinking about it more and more, I sort of came upon the idea of like, marketing doesn't have to be so intrusive, doesn't have to be so persuasive. These examples were just provided in this conversation shows that authenticity, being genuine, helping, those are the ways that you're going to sort of build a brand that lasts, a brand that people are loyal to. And so I sort of landed on this idea of mindful marketing, which is simply about just thinking about the impact that your story has, thinking about the impact that your marketing has beyond the sort of dollar signs. So how does it affect people in the real world, real people in the real world, as they go about their lives? And essentially broke it down into four four basic pillars, which were context, which is sort of considering the situation that you're in, and purpose, which ties back to your why you got into business, and what your purpose is. The message, so the particular message that your marketing is sending, that you're wanting to communicate with your customers and your audience. And then finally, your impact, which is how does the message that you're delivering actually, how is it conveyed and how is it received by your audience? So we can dive into that more if you want to, but
Totally.
that's the gist.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think it's so useful the way you've structured it, because it's such a I think, for people right now, again, people, business owners as well at the moment, are really busy and kind of overwhelmed. And I think, coming back to that, you've coined a term there that is making sense of what I think everyone is feeling at the moment. And I think, context, purpose, message, and impact are really good kind of quick ways to go back to checking yourself. And I know that you've said that mindful marketing is kind of coming from a place of self-awareness, and I think that's really powerful, because it's like, before you share this message, checking in on those things and getting to a place where you have that kind of compass, I guess, to navigate at the moment. Am I aligning with this? Because I think what's powerful about the whole concept and the way this is evolving is it's the right. We're seeing examples like what we talked about of Chia Sisters and things, which is the right thing to do first and foremost. And then it's so obvious that when you peel back another layer to that it's also the most effective, and that's really powerful, and that's exciting, I think. I mean, if I think about my business and how to respond, we work a lot in tourism. I run in-person workshops. I very much value sitting with clients in person. We are a long way from being the most affected, so far from it. We've got a lot of flexibility, of course, in our work, but ultimately, in my response, the only appropriate response was to just double down on how much value you add and how much you want to help. And that was first and foremost that my friends are in business, my clients are my friends. And when this started to come at us, when we were headed towards the iceberg, if you like, my sense was, what can I do right now to help, and what can I do to put myself in positions where I can add the most value to people during this important time. And what was interesting to reflect on that is that that was the right thing to do. I think it will also have a positive impact for our business, which is the kind of natural consequence of adding value. But it's also exactly how I started the business, and so it's been an interesting reflection on me, because for my journey of going like kind of almost back to base a little bit. Like when I left my job, my whole marketing strategy for my business was put yourself in places where you can add value and don't worry about anything else. Like, that's it. Like I rang the chamber, I went to business networking events, I started meeting people for coffee, and I just started adding as much value as possible, because that's all I knew I could do, and nothing else seemed appropriate. And it worked really well. And it's built over the years. And for me, the last few weeks, although they've been intense and overwhelming at times, and it's kind of not all rosy out there for sure, but it has felt like going back to base, and that's actually been really comforting and really reassuring for our identity as a business.
Yeah, man, I wanted to give you some props around that, because the way I've seen you handle this whole situation has been super inspiring. From the beginning, when you started just doing simple posts on Facebook, and you showed true leadership around how New Zealander businesses should be responding in this situation. And then came the Shift Happens Facebook group, and that was the perfect way for you and Shift On to sort of offer up your help at that time, to build community around struggling businesses, which are your friends and your customers and clients and your community. And that is ultimately the perfect example of what mindful marketing looks like. It's finding opportunities to add value, to help genuinely. I mean, the reason it works is because like you say, it's so aligned to who you are and your base and your also the brand as well. But for someone else to try and do that, if they hadn't been in this space, and to come in and try and offer business advisory services at this time to sort of capitalize on the situation, it wouldn't have worked. It would have fallen flat. But because of your background and because of your personality and the sort of status and money you have in the community already, this has been perfect. And yeah, I wanted to give you some props around how you've handled this whole situation, because it's been really good. It's been really helpful, and I'm sure a lot of people are benefiting from it. And like you say, at the end of this, it's probably going to be good for business as well, but that's not why you do it, and people see that. So
thanks, I really appreciate that. And I think for one thing, we're really lucky in New Zealand, and I think it's had a big impact, because we right now we take our signals from the person in charge, and I think Jacinda Ardern has set the tone so clearly here, which is we need to take this really seriously. We need to be deliberate in all the decisions we make, but we also need to be really kind and compassionate and do it properly as well. And I think she set the tone, and we've navigated some big challenges over the past week with losing a family member and how that worked, and we've rubbed up against all sorts of challenges with airlines and funeral directors and the health system and all sorts. And my sense was that the way Jacinda's kind of led the response in terms of the leadership she's provided and the way she's behaved, I could feel that in the other people we were dealing with, and it was just a real reminder of how much of an impact that can have. And so when you said around the mindful marketing that one of the pillars is impact, and I think personal brands are really important right now, and Shift On is a vehicle of somewhat, but behind that is the work that I'm doing and the relationships that I have with people as well. And so that's ultimately what matters. And I think I quickly became aware of the fact, which is not something that I'd kind of fully recognized, which will sound silly to people, but I kind of quickly became aware of the fact that when I was out and about talking to businesses and dealing with this initially and the travel restrictions stuff, that people were listening. And actually, initially it freaked me the fuck out, because I was like, I was talking to businesses and I was like, I don't actually know, like I'm totally confused about the situation as well. And I'm in no position to forecast the future in that, but it did mean I had to get present with the fact that what I'm saying on social media and what I'm saying in person to people and stuff does have an impact. And if everyone is in that position, and your friends and your family and your business and your team, if you are the owner of a business right now, what you are saying to your team and your customers really matters. And so people need to get present with the impact of their words, because I've seen it go the other way as well. I know in my business network, one person in particular in the last week just kind of freaked out about the economic collapse and spent a good few days like pouring energy into the most doomsday possible scenarios and kind of borderline conspiracies about the whole thing. And I was like, man, your whole, like the way you've chosen to respond, and I ended up in I've had the same criticism of kind of Gareth Morgan, who's putting some really doomsday scenarios out there at the moment about the economic situation. Now, his credibility as an economist, unquestionable and inaccurate and things, but I made the comment earlier this week that that's why he didn't make it in politics. That's why he's not in charge, is because your kind of credentials or your expertise in whatever your respective area is right now is kind of secondary to the leadership that people need to provide. And I felt the same about there were a couple of GPs who were very vocal about, even once the government had announced the lockdown, they were very vocal about the fact that it should have happened sooner, and there's going to be deaths, and this is going to be destructive. But it was once the decision had been made, and my underlying sense was, we need to trust expertise right now. We need to absolutely trust where people are at. But people also need good leadership, and they need good communications. And so sometimes in those scenarios, that has to be left to the communicators, people like Jacinda Ardern, who have the ability to bring reassurance and calm and build confidence, which has a real tangible impact on the outcome, actually.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with what you're saying there. And I saw some of the stuff that the likes of Gareth Morgan were putting out, and like you say, maybe there is some truth to it, but it's just not the way to go about communicating. It's not helping. It's fun. At this moment, it's not helping. And while there is space for scrutiny, I don't think now is the time for it. But yeah, I mean, it comes back to that thing we just keep saying, is like, the way to be communicating now is to be adding value, to be adding, to be helping, and to be of service to your community. That's that's the approach. And yeah, and when people aren't that way, it just breeds negativity, breeds fear, and just adds to the anxiety and the stress that people are already experiencing, which as businesses and as brands should be working to not add to that if you can do that.
Completely. And I think one of the things that we discussed kind of earlier on in the piece in our business is that under the enormity of the challenges that we're facing, creative and sound strategic thinking is going to be really important to bounce back with the business you had before, or to pivot to something new, or to rebuild something from scratch, whatever scenario you're in, because everyone's in a different space and there are many different factors that influence that. But regardless of how you have to respond, because everyone has to respond in some way, that requires creativity, and creativity and fear just can't coexist. Like you can't be in a paralyzing state of fear about the world right now and making sound decisions. And it's, the mindful marketing, when you said it, resonated with me, because the bad responses have been the opposite, right? Like the warehouse were not exercising mindful marketing when they tried to reposition their business after decades in New Zealand's minds associating with a whole lot of products, and tried to change that. It was not a mindful practice, and it added anxiety into the community, because they felt like businesses were going to attempt to work around these lockdowns, and that added anxiety. I remember the conversations I was having in those couple of days. It's like, what do you mean you're going to be able to go to the warehouse? This is terrible. Like that's not a lockdown. And so they did the opposite. And so I think really the businesses that are in tune with that, despite all the challenges and all the potential impacts that it's going to have, there is real value in exercising that. It really will matter, and I think it's important for people to be aware of that right now, and what value you can add. And I think we had a great breakthrough with our tourism clients, and looking at abletasman.com and the great work they've been doing in building audiences over the past few years. And the simple message that kind of dropped out of our session together was, we recognized that tourism was stopping overnight, and that's a big deal for a business like that. But we all sat, we're all in the meeting, and suddenly someone said, nature's still here. And we're like, yeah, let's just celebrate that. Like what we've always been about is the beautiful Abel Tasman, and what that means to us, and how important that place is, and how special it is to so many people, and how many memories have been created there. And we can't access it right now, but we can still celebrate it, and we can still acknowledge that nature's still there. And that's an amazing platform to have right now.
Oh, absolutely, man. That seems like one of those times where, if you give the space to really think about the why and what's important, then those are the kind of moments that will pop up. The nature is still here. That's a perfect story to be telling right now. There are plenty of opportunities to go deeper with the storytelling around that kind of thing. While that, there's no one stopping you sharing photos, empty beaches, regenerating forests, native wildlife, all have a chance to breathe throughout this reprieve that we have at the moment. And that's perhaps an opportunity to sort of share that story in a more deeper sense with the world at the moment. It's kind of a unique perspective on tourism, because it's empty at the moment, which no one ever gets to see. But yeah, if you just, that's my message, man. If you just take a moment to step back and just look at the big picture, look at the real core of why you do what you do, and then think about how you can share some value from that core. It can only be positive. It can only be good for you and your brand, and it's going to be authentic, and it's going to be true, and that's what people need right now.
Totally. I think that's a really good place to leave it. Actually, I could sit and talk all evening and all morning for you. And let's not roll out doing this again, because I think one of the interesting things at the moment is trying to remain present in what we're dealing with at the moment. Like, I'm thinking a lot of businesses are anticipating problems that don't yet exist. I saw businesses in week one, when their revenue hadn't changed at all, freaking out about having no money, which is understandable, totally understandable, but also, because of the pace of it, we do have to be really cognizant of the fact that you just have to deal with the problems and the challenges you're facing today and new ones tomorrow as they come, and be at your best to kind of respond to those. And I think from a communications perspective, right now, the only appropriate response, if you are not in a position to operate or to sell as an essential business, the only appropriate response is to double down on showing you care and showing why you matter, and being of kind of meaning to your customers. It's kind of the only appropriate response. But as this progresses and as the conditions and the landscape changes, that will evolve, and different responses will be important. I mean, I remember the week before the lockdown, it was very important to be communicating that you were taking it seriously while you were still open. I think our restaurants and our tourism businesses had to come out quite strongly and say, we're still here, but we're taking it seriously, and you can trust us to make the right decisions on behalf of our customers and our staff. And then it was, we're not here anymore, but these are the things that we care about, and we've always cared about our community. And so I expect that to shift as we go through this, and the communication kind of needs and angles to have to change for people. So I think we should definitely keep talking about it.
Yeah, for sure, man. As the context changes, the rest of the pillars change as to how you respond. But yeah, totally agree with you. And yeah, let's do it again sometime. But it's been great chatting, and I just wish everybody out there the very best at this time. And yeah, what more can you say other than take care and kia kaha, right?
Yeah, totally. And I'm going to, well said, and I will also make sure we post your article back in, because I've already had some really good feedback about it. And I think it's good for people to read and come back to, and yeah, thanks for producing it. I think it's timely.
No worries, man. This work in progress too. I'm the first to admit I don't have all the answers, so
I don't think anyone does.
Take feedback on it. No, not at all. All right, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Talk soon, man.
Yeah, cheers.